The observation deck of Halcyon Ring offered a panoramic view of a slow-motion apocalypse, and Jacob usually came here when he could not sleep, which was most nights. Below the station's dirty reinforced glass, the gas giant designation Polyphemus Prime churned in violent bands of bruised purple and sulphurous yellow. It was a massive, indifferent eye, staring back at the fleck of metal and humanity orbiting it. Jacob pressed his forehead against the cold, transparent aluminum. He looked like a man who had been eroded by sandstorms. His skin was rough, his jawline covered in a stubble that was more gray than black these days, and his eyes were the color of flint. He wore a mechanic's jumpsuit that had been patched so many times, the original fabric was merely a rumor. To the casual observer, he was just another piece of debris left over from the interplanetary war, a drifter finding gravity wherever he could. He checked his pocket. He had exactly 47 credits to his name. 47 credits meant he had a choice to make. He could buy a recharge for the heating coil in the maintenance crawlspace he illegally called home, or he could buy a hot meal. He could not do both. His stomach gave a traitorous growl, making the decision for him. Jacob pushed off the glass and walked away from the view. He moved with a heavy, deliberate gait, the walk of a man who was used to gravity plating, failing without warning. The station corridors were crowded, a neon-lit artery of commerce and desperation. Halcyon Ring was a neutral zone technically, a hub where the corporate coalition and the independent systems rubbed shoulders. It was also where the Lupanari had begun to integrate after the armistice. He saw them in the crowd. They were hard to miss. Tall, digitigrade legs, fur that ranged from slate gray to deep russet, and ears that twitched at the high-frequency whine of the station's power grid. Most humans gave them a wide berth. The war was over on paper signed 6 years ago, but the blood took longer to dry in people's memories. The Lupanari had been terrifying enemies, their pack ships tearing through alliance blockades with a coordination that seemed supernatural. Now, they were just refugees and laborers hauling crates or working security for the very people who used to hunt them. Jacob kept his head down. He did not hate them. He did not hate anyone anymore. Hate required energy, and he was running on empty. He just wanted to eat. He navigated toward the lower sectors, down to level 9, where the air recyclers hummed a little louder, and the smell of ozone was overpowered by the scent of frying grease. There was a noodle stall there, wedged between a pawn shop and a defunct holographic arcade. It did not have a name, just a flickering sign that said, "Food," in 3 languages. Jacob slid onto a stool at the far end of the counter. The metal was cold through his thin jumpsuit. "The usual," Jacob said. His voice was gravel, scraping on concrete. The cook, a large human man with a robotic prosthetic arm that leaked hydraulic fluid, grunted. "Prices went up. Inflation. There are 12 credits for the bowl now." Jacob did not argue. Arguing was for people who had options. Fine. He waited, watching the steam rise from the vats. The stall was mostly empty, save for a few dock workers nursing synth beers in the corner. Then the door chimed, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. A girl walked in. She was Lupanari, but she looked nothing like the proud armored warriors Jacob remembered from the vid feeds. She was small, perhaps the equivalent of a human teenager, with fur, the color of ash, mixed with snow. Her clothes were a mismatch of scavenged fabrics, an oversized mechanic's jacket hanging off her narrow shoulders. Her ears were flattened against her skull, and her tail was tucked low between her legs. She did not sit. She hovered near the entrance, her nose twitching as she inhaled the scent of the broth. "Hey!" the cook shouted, pointing a grease-stained spatula at her. "No loitering. Buy or get out." The girl flinched, her golden eyes darting around the room. "I have credits," she said. Her voice was scratchy, accented the common tongue, feeling heavy in her mouth. She dug into her pockets and placed a handful of chits on the counter. The cook swept them up with his robotic hand, the metal fingers clicking. He counted them. 3 credits. You cannot even buy water for 3 credits. Get out, stray." "Please," she said, and there was a desperate edge to the growl in her throat. "Just broth. No noodles. Just the hot water." "I said get out." The cook reached under the counter. Jacob knew that motion. He was reaching for a stun baton. "We do not serve your kind when you cannot pay. Bad for business." The dock workers in the corner laughed. One of them, a man with a tattoo of the Earth Coalition on his neck, spat on the floor. "Go back to your kennel." Jacob looked at his own bowl, which had just been placed in front of him. It was steaming, smelling of salt and synthetic pork. His stomach was cramped with hunger. He looked at the girl. She was trembling. Not from fear, he realized, looking at the tightness of her jaw, but from the effort of not snapping. She was proud. She was starving, but she was proud. He saw the bandage on her arm. It was a dirty rag, soaked through with dark, almost black blood. A plasma burn, judging by the cauterized edges, visible beneath the cloth. An untreated infection in this environment would kill her in 3 days. Jacob closed his eyes for a second. "Do not engage," the old protocols whispered in his mind. "You are a ghost. Ghosts do not make waves." He remembered the faces of the refugees on Titan. He remembered the ones he could not pull onto the dropship before the atmospheric seals blew. He remembered the weight of a child in his arms who had stopped breathing 10 minutes before they reached orbit. Jacob sighed. It was a long, weary sound. "Hey," Jacob said. The cook stopped the baton half raised. The girl froze her eyes, locking onto Jacob. They were predatory, terrified eyes. "Give her a bowl," Jacob said. He slid his credit chip across the counter. "Full portion, and a protein bar. The real stuff, not the soy paste." The cook looked at the chip, then at Jacob. "You paying for the stray old man?" "I am paying for a customer," Jacob said, his voice flat. "Is my credit good or not?" The cook sneered, but swiped the chip. Money was money, even if it came from a fool. "Fine. But she eats outside. I do not want fleas here." Jacob took his own bowl and the protein bar. He stood up, his joints popping. He walked over to the girl, who watched him, as if he were holding a grenade rather than food. "Come on," Jacob said. He walked out of the stall without looking back. He heard the hesitation in her footsteps, the soft click-click of her claws on the deck plating following him. They found a bench near a viewing port that looked out over the docking arms of the station. Outside, the warning lights of the station were flashing amber. A silent alarm. Something was happening near the heavy freight docks, a collision or a containment breach. But down here on level 9, nobody cared about the troubles of the wealthy. Jacob sat down and placed the extra bowl on the bench. He tossed the protein bar next to it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small sealed package. It was a medical patch, military grade, expired by 2 years, but still functional. He had been saving it for himself. "For the arm," Jacob said, gesturing to her wound. The girl stared at the food, then at him. She snatched the protein bar first, tearing the wrapper with her teeth and swallowing half of it in one bite. She ate with a ferocity that made Jacob look away. It was the hunger of someone who had not eaten in a week. When she slowed down, focusing on the broth, she finally spoke. "Why?" Jacob slurped his own noodles. "Why what?" "Why help?" She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Humans usually just kick, or yell, or try to grab the tail." "I had extra credits," Jacob lied. He did not mention that he was now down to 12 credits, which meant he would be fasting for the next 2 days. "And I hate loud cooks," the girl snorted. It was a sharp barking sound. "Humans are weird," she muttered, drinking the broth directly from the bowl. "But good weird, mostly. Some are just trash." "I have been called worse," Jacob said. "Eat the noodles before they get cold. It is the worst investment in history if I spent 20 credits just to hear you complain." She paused, looking at him with a tilted head. Her ears perked up slightly, one of them possessing a notch where a piece had been torn away. "I am Nira." Jacob. Jacob, She tested the name, rolling the syllables. You smell like old oil, and ozone and sadness. Jacob chuckled, a dry, rattling sound in his chest. Eat your food, kid. Nira finished the bowl and picked up the medical patch. She struggled with the seal, her claws too sharp for the delicate plastic tab. Here, Jacob said. He reached out. Nira flinched back, a low growl rumbling in her chest, but then she stopped. She looked at his hands. They were scarred, thick-fingered, but steady. She extended her arm slowly. Jacob worked quickly. He peeled back the dirty rag. The wound was ugly, a jagged burn that was weeping yellow fluid. He cleaned it with the antiseptic wipe from the kit, ignoring her hiss of pain, and applied the patch. The biogel activated instantly, sealing the wound and releasing a localized anesthetic and antibiotic cocktail. Better, he asked. Nira flexed her arm. The pain vanished, replaced by a cool numbness. She looked at him with a new expression, curiosity. You have good hands, she said. Doctor's hands. Mechanic hands, Jacob corrected. Machines are easier to fix than people. They do not complain when you use the wrong wrench. Nira laughed again, and this time she leaned in closer, sniffing the air around him. She was invading his personal space, her nose twitching near his neck. You smell different there, she whispered. Under the oil. There is a hum. Before Jacob could pull away, her hand darted out. Her fingertips brushed the skin directly behind his right ear, right over the hidden port of his neural interface. Zap. A shockwave of static slammed into Jacob's skull. It was not pain, but a feedback loop, a screech of white noise that blinded him for a nanosecond. Nira yelped and jerked her hand back as if she had touched a hot stove. She scrambled backward on the bench, her eyes-wide pupils dilated to black saucers. "What are you?" she gasped. She was rubbing her fingertips, which were smoking slightly. That felt like a pack ship, but broken, twisted. Jacob stood up abruptly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He pulled up the collar of his jumpsuit, covering the implant. His hand was shaking. That interface had been dormant for 6 years. It was dead technology. It should not have reacted to a touch. It is just a static discharge, Jacob said, his voice harsh. Old carpet, dry air. No. Nira shook her head, her ears flattened again. I know the song of the ships. I hear them in my sleep. You hum like them, but you are human. I am just a mechanic, Jacob said, backing away. The shadows of the corridor seemed to stretch toward him. He felt exposed, naked. If she knew, if anyone knew what was buried in his skull, the corporate coalition would dissect him before sunrise. Keep the patch, kid. Stay out of trouble. He turned and walked away fast, almost running. Wait, Nira called out. Jacob did not stop. He melted into the crowd of the evening shift change, disappearing into the gray mass of humanity, leaving the wolf girl staring after him, with confusion burning in her golden eyes. Jacob lived in Maintenance Bay 4 Alpha. It was not an apartment. It was a section of the station's atmospheric processing unit that had been walled off during a renovation 20 years ago and forgotten. He had hacked the door lock, spliced into the power grid, and set up a cot between 2 massive ventilation ducts. It was noisy, hot, and smelled of recycled carbon dioxide, but it was free. He lay on his cot staring at the ceiling pipes. He could not sleep. The spot behind his ear was itching. It felt like phantom ants crawling beneath his skin. Packship frequency, she had said. He rubbed his face. He had been a combat engineer in the 7th Orbital Division, Project Emberlink. They had told him the implants were for better interface with the drone swarms. They had lied. The implants were experimental tech, salvaged from crashed Luminari vessels, and reverse-engineered to bridge the gap between human logic and the biological consciousness of the enemy ships. He was supposed to be a hijacker, a mind virus. But the war ended before he was fully deployed. The project was scrubbed. The records were burned. He had used a back-alley surgeon to suppress the signal, to put the hardware to sleep. So why did a stray girl in a noodle shop trigger a handshake protocol just by touching his skin? Jacob turned over, trying to find a comfortable spot on the thin mattress. He closed his eyes. Ping. His eyes snapped open. That was not a sound. That was a thought. Ping. Ping. Query. Jacob sat up, gasping. The sound was coming from inside his head. It was a digital knock, crisp and demanding. Suddenly, the lights in his maintenance bay flickered. The ventilation fans ground to a halt. The emergency heavy blast door that sealed his room from the main corridor hissed and lost its magnetic lock. Sparks showered down from the junction box on the wall. The station's local grid was seizing up. Someone was hammering the local network with a code so dense it was physically overheating the copper wiring. Jacob rolled off the cot, grabbing his multi-tool from the floor. Instinct took over. He wasn't a veteran anymore. He was an engineer. System overload, he muttered to himself. Bypass the breakers. He scrambled to the wall panel, ripping off the cover. Smoke billowed out. He could see the problem immediately. An external signal was trying to force a handshake with the station's primitive routing software. It was like trying to pour an ocean through a drinking straw. Stop it, Jacob growled, jamming his tool into the port. He manually severed the connection to the main grid and rerouted the surge into the station's grounding loop. You are going to blow the capacitors. He worked frantically for 30 seconds, his hands a blur of motion. He twisted wires, reset the fuses, and smoothed out the digital spike. The lights stopped flickering and settled into a steady, dim amber. The fans groaned back to life. Jacob slumped against the wall, wiping sweat and grease from his forehead. Idiot hackers, he breathed. Trying to brute force a level 9 firewall. We were not trying to hack the firewall, a voice said from the open doorway. We were knocking on your door. Jacob spun around, raising his multi-tool like a weapon. Nira stood there. She was not alone. Behind her stood two massive Lupanari figures. They wore kinetic armor, scarred and painted with sigils that Jacob recognized from the deep space briefings. Warriors. One was holding a heavy plasma rifle, the barrel lowered but ready. Jacob tensed. I have nothing to steal. You can have the cot. Nira stepped forward. She looked different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. She looked at Jacob with a mixture of awe and suspicion. We did not come to steal, Nira said. She pointed a clawed finger at him. You fix the surge. In 20 seconds. Kalen said it would take a normal human 10 minutes to even find the breaker. One of the warriors, the one without the rifle, stepped into the light. He was enormous, his fur jet black, a scar running through his left eye. He sniffed the air. This is him, the warrior rumbled. His voice was like tectonic plates grinding together. Yes, brother, Nira said. He is the one. Jacob backed up until he hit the ventilation duct. The one what? Look, I bought you dinner. We are even. Get out of my house. It is not a house, the warrior named Kalen said, looking around the cramped, dirty crawlspace with disdain. It is a coffin, he looked at Jacob. My sister says you sing like us. We sent a pulse to test the theory. Your neural network caught it and grounded it. A normal human brain would have seized. Jacob's blood ran cold. I do not know what you are talking about. I am just a mechanic. We do not have time for lies, human, Kalen growled. The Orion Crown security forces are sweeping the docks. They know we are here. They are looking for our ship. Not my problem, Jacob said. It became your problem when you touched Nira, Kalen said. You are marked now. The sensors tracked her biosignature to you. If they find you, they will scan you. If they scan you and find what you are hiding, what will they do to a man with illegal military-grade wetware in his brain? Jacob tightened his grip on the multi-tool. He knew the answer. They would vivisect him. What do you want? Jacob asked. Nira stepped closer, ignoring her brother's warning growl. My family, she said softly. The Aurora Howell. She is sick, damaged. We cannot leave the system, and she is asking for you. A ship is asking for me. Jacob looked at her like she was insane. She felt you, Naira said. When we touched, she felt the echo. Please, Jacob. You saved me today. Save her. Just look at her. If you cannot help, we will leave you alone. Jacob looked at the open door. He could hear sirens wailing in the distance now. The traffic accident was escalating. Security was closing in. If he stayed here, he would be found. If he went with them, he was walking into the den of the wolves. But the itch behind his ear was gone. It had been replaced by a low, steady thrumming in his head. A direction. A pull. Where is she? Jacob asked. They moved through the maintenance tunnels, a path that bypassed the security checkpoints. The Lupanari moved with terrifying silence for creatures of their size. Jacob struggled to keep up, his human legs burning as they climbed ladders and shimmied across piping conduits, suspended over the abyss of the reactor shafts. They emerged in a derelict sector of the shipyards, designated for decommissioned freighters. It was dark here, the gravity fluctuating wildly. There, Naira whispered. They stood on a catwalk overlooking a pressurized docking bay. In the center of the bay, hidden amidst the rusting hulks of old mining barges, lay the Aurora Howell. Jacob stopped breathing for a moment. It was not a machine. That was the first thing his engineer's mind registered. It was grown, not built. The hull was a seamless expanse of silver material that looked like liquid mercury frozen in time. It curved organically, resembling the muscle structure of a predator mid-leap. There were no rivets, no weld lines. It was beautiful and terrifying. But it hurt. A massive gash ran along the port flank, oozing a shimmering blue fluid that vaporized into mist. The hull around the wound was gray and dull, like dead skin. She took a railgun slug, breaking the blockade at Sector 4. Kalen said, his voice low. The wound is not healing. The neural pathways are severed. She cannot calculate the jump coordinates. Jacob walked down the stairs, drawn to the ship like a moth to a flame. As he got closer, the headache he had lived with for 6 years, the dull, constant pressure of his implants vanished. It was like stepping out of a noisy room into total silence. He reached the docking clamp. The ship loomed over him, 30 meters of alien biology and star-faring power. Careful, Kalen warned. She is in pain. She might lash out. Jacob ignored him. He walked up to the hull. He raised his hand. Jacob, do not, Naira started. Jacob placed his palm flat against the silver skin of the ship. Boom! The reaction was instantaneous. A pulse of light, brilliant and blindingly white, erupted from the point where Jacob's hand touched the hull. It raced outward, spreading across the surface of the ship like lightning through storm clouds. The dull gray scales flushed with color, iridescent blues, violets, and golds. The ship heaved. The landing struts groaned as the vessel shifted, leaning into Jacob's touch. Inside, Jacob's mind, the silence shattered. Connection detected. Signal verified. Designation unknown. Status compatible. Pain, pain. Relief. Hello. It was a voice, but not a voice. It was a tsunami of emotion and data. It was the feeling of wind on a mountaintop and the mathematical precision of a hyperdrive calculation all at once. Jacob gasped, his knees buckling. He would have fallen, but the ship seemed to hold him, the magnetic field around the hull intensifying to keep him upright. The lines of light on the ship's hull began to pulse in perfect synchronization with Jacob's own heartbeat. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Behind him, the Lupanari were frozen. Kalen's mouth was slightly open, his rifle forgotten in his hands. Naira's tail was wagging a slow, subconscious rhythm of disbelief. Impossible, Kalen whispered. She is sinking with him. A human. That is impossible. Jacob opened his eyes. They were burning. He could feel the ship's injury, as if it were a slash across his own ribs. He could feel the cold void of space waiting above. He could feel the ship's fear and her sudden, overwhelming curiosity about the small, broken man touching her. Jacob turned to look at the wolves. His voice sounded strange, layered as if he were speaking through a synthesizer. "She is not just hurt," Jacob said. "She is lonely." The lights on the Aurora Howl flared brighter, casting long, dancing shadows across the bay. The invitation was clear. The gangplank hissed and lowered, extending directly to Jacob's feet. The veteran took a breath of the stale station air, looked at the dark opening of the alien ship, and stepped forward. He was not just a mechanic anymore. For the first time in 6 years, he was online. The interior of the Aurora Howl did not smell like a starship. It did not smell of ozone, recycled air, and hydraulic fluid. It smelled of damp earth, ozone, and something vaguely like cinnamon. Jacob stood in the airlock, the membrane behind him, sealing with a wet, organic hiss, rather than a mechanical clang. He felt like he had just stepped inside the belly of a leviathan that had swallowed a luxury liner. The walls were not plated metal, but a rigid, pearlescent material that felt warm to the touch. Veins of soft blue light pulsed rhythmically beneath the surface, syncing with a heartbeat that seemed to vibrate through the floor plates. "Welcome aboard," Naira said. Her voice was softer here, stripped of the defensive edge she wore on the station. She looked at the walls with blatant affection. "She is happy you are here. The lights are usually dimmer when she is hurt." Kalen, the massive black-furred Lupinari captain, walked past Jacob. In the confined space of the corridor, he was overwhelmed. His shoulders brushed the upper struts, and his kinetic armor hummed with a low-frequency field. "Do not get comfortable, human," Kalen rumbled. "You are here because she opened the door. That does not mean I have agreed to let you stay." "I am not looking for a lease," Jacob replied, his eyes scanning the ceiling where nerve bundles acted as conduits. "I just want to know why a bioship thinks I am one of her relatives." "That makes 2 of us," a new voice said. Jacob instinctively reached for the sidearm he had not carried in 6 years. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was feminine, crisp, and sounded distinctly unimpressed. A holographic avatar materialized in the center of the corridor. It was not the flickering, grainy projection of standard Alliance tech. It was solid, rendered in hard light. The avatar took the form of a human woman in archaic naval dress, but her eyes were vertical slits, like a wolf's. "I am Astra," the AI said, crossing her arms. "Ship intellect and primary systems manager. And you are the anomaly that just spiked my sensory grid by 300%. "Jacob," the veteran said, nodding slightly. "Nice to meet the brain." "He fixed the power surge in the maintenance bay, Astra," Naira interjected, stepping between the man and the hologram. "And he healed my arm. Look." She held up her bandage. Astra leaned in her hard, light face, inches from Jacob's nose. "Basic first aid. Impressive for a species that usually treats injuries by amputation or litigation. Follow me. Medical bay is this way. We need to scan that head of yours before Kalen decides to space you out of an airlock." The tour of the Aurora Howl was a lesson in xenobiology. Jacob had fought against Lupinari ships during the war, seeing them as terrifying silhouettes, spitting plasma across the void. He had never been inside one. It was disorienting. There were no sharp angles. Everything curved. The pipes were arterial conduits, pumping coolant that looked like blue blood. The wires were nervous systems. They passed other crew members. A Lupinari with rust-colored fur was tending to a hydroponic garden that grew directly out of the wall. 2 younger ones were wrestling in a common area, stopping to stare at the human with wide, unblinking eyes. "They have never seen a human this close without a blaster rifle," Naira whispered to Jacob. "They are not missing much," Jacob muttered. They arrived at the medical bay. It looked less like a hospital and more like a cathedral of glass and light. In the center was a biobed, a molded depression in the floor, filled with a translucent, breathable gel. "In," Kalen ordered. Jacob hesitated. I prefer my doctors to have hands, not algorithms. In, Kalen repeated, his hand resting on the hilt of a vibration knife at his belt. Jacob sighed and stepped into the gel. It was warm and suspended him instantly, taking the weight off his tired joints. It felt alarmingly good. Astra hovered over him. Initiating deep scan. Try not to think about anything embarrassing. I can see your cortisol levels. A ring of amber light swept over Jacob, starting from his boots and moving up. When it reached his neck, the scanner shrieked. Red warning glyphs erupted in the air. "What is that?" Kalen barked, stepping forward. Astra's avatar flickered. Neural interface. Heavy military grade. It is woven directly into his brainstem and temporal lobe. It is not a standard Alliance issue. The signature is mimicking a packship node. The room went silent. Nira looked at Jacob, her ears perking up in confusion. Kalen looked at him with cold fury. "You are a hijacker," Kalen accused, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "The Alliance built soldiers to hack our ships, to override our minds and turn us into drones." Jacob sat up in the gel, the sticky substance dripping off his jumpsuit. He felt exposed, the secret he had guarded for 6 years, laid bare in seconds. "I was an engineer," Jacob said, his voice hard. "7th Orbital Division. Yes, the implant was designed to interface with your tech, but I never used it. The war ended before my unit deployed." "You have the key to our souls in your head," Kalen snarled. "And you say you are just a mechanic." "It is dormant," Jacob snapped back, anger flaring to match the wolf's. "I paid a back-alley surgeon 2,000 credits to sever the connection. It has been a dead weight in my skull for 6 years. Until today. Until your sister touched it." "He is telling the truth about the status," Astra interjected, studying the data streams. "The hardware is heavily damaged. Scar tissue has grown over the ports. It is a miracle he is not having seizures every hour. But the core processor is active. It woke up when it detected the Aurora howl. That is why the ship likes him. She does not see a human. She sees a lost node trying to reconnect." Nira moved to the edge of the biobed. "Is that why you were alone, Jacob? Because you carry a piece of us, and the humans do not understand it?" Jacob looked away. "I was alone because it is safer. For everyone." While the Aurora howl hid in the shadows of the scrapyard, high above in the glittering spires of the Halcyon Ring's upper sector, Helena Dre was looking at a spreadsheet. Her office was a study in minimalism and expense. Real wood from Earth covered the floor. The air smelled of genuine vanilla, not the chemical substitute. Helena stood by the window, a woman in her late 40s with hair cut in a severe asymmetrical bob that cost more than Jacob made in a year. She tapped the glass of her datapad. "Explain this discrepancy, Commander." The holographic image of a station security commander shimmered on her desk. "It was a power surge, Director Dre. Level 9. We tracked the source to a maintenance bay, but the occupant was gone. Just an old squatter." "And the Lupinari signature?" Helena asked. Her voice was calm, melodic, and utterly devoid of warmth. "Confirmed," the commander said. "We found fur samples and blood. We believe the packship Aurora Howl sent a landing party. They are desperate. Their ship is bleeding out in the dark." Helena smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "It is not a ship, Commander. It is a biological asset. Asset number 49 Alpha. And according to the new interpretation of the salvage laws, any biological asset that endangers station security is subject to immediate seizure and containment." She swiped the screen, bringing up a grainy security feed from the noodle shop. It showed Jacob handing the bowl of food to Nira. Then it showed the moment Nira touched his neck and the brief distortion in the video feed caused by the electromagnetic pulse. Helena paused the video. She zoomed in on Jacob's neck. "Identify the human," she ordered. "We are running facial recognition now," the commander replied. "But the database is slow with veterans. Too many of them look alike, broken and dirty." Prioritize it, Helena said. That man is not just a veteran. Look at the distortion. That is a neural feedback loop. He interfaced with the wolf girl. She set the datapad down. The Aurora Howl is valuable, yes. But a human who can interface with it, that is the key to the kingdom. If we can replicate that, we do not just own the ships. We control them. Find him. I want the ship intact, but I want the man alive. The girl is collateral. Do what you must. Yes, Director. The hologram faded. Helena turned back to the window, staring down at the swirling clouds of Polyphemus Prime. Evolution is coming, she whispered to the empty room, and I will be the one holding the leash. Back on the Aurora Howl, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. Jacob was sitting on a crate in the cargo hold, wringing the biogel out of his shirt. Kalen had confiscated his multi-tool and set a guard at the door, a silent, gray-furred Lupinari, who watched Jacob's every move. Jacob was calculating escape routes. The airlock was locked. The ventilation shafts were too small for a human. He was trapped. You look like you were trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Jacob looked up. Nira was standing there, holding a tray. It smelled interesting, like roasted meat and spices that made his eyes water. I am trying to figure out how to get off this ship before your brother decides I am a security risk and spaces me, Jacob said. Nira set the tray down on the crate next to him. He will not space you. Astra likes you. She says your neural architecture is fascinating, like finding a steam engine running a quantum computer. Flattering, Jacob grunted. Eat, Nira said, pushing the tray forward. It is Rashka, spiced lizard from the homeworld. Or, well, the synth meat version of it. It is spicy. It helps with the nerves. Jacob looked at the food. He was starving. He picked up a strip of the meat and took a bite. The heat hit him instantly. It was not just spicy. It was a chemical assault. His eyes watered. His throat burned and he let out a coughing fit that echoed in the cargo hold. Nira threw her head back and made a sound Jacob had not heard before. It was a high-pitched yipping sound. Laughter. Genuine, unbridled laughter. You turned purple, she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye. Human faces are so expressive. Your skin changes color like a chameleon. Jacob wheezed, reaching for the water pouch on the tray. You tried to poison me. It is mild, Nira protested, still giggling. Kalen eats it with chili extract. You are just weak. Jacob drank the water, the burning sensation slowly fading to a dull throb. He looked at Nira. She was sitting on her heels, her tail sweeping the floor in a slow arc. She looked younger now, less like a refugee and more like a kid pulling a prank. Why did you bring me here, Nira? Jacob asked, his voice serious now. Really? Nira's smile faded. Her ears dipped. Because I saw you. In the shop. You were hungry, but you bought me food. You were tired, but you fixed my arm. Kalen protects us, but he sees enemies everywhere. He thinks everyone wants to hurt the pack. But you. She looked at his hands. You have hands that fix things. I fix machines, Jacob said. I do not fix politics. And I definitely do not fix wanted starships. We need you, Nira said. Astra says the station is initiating a lockdown. They are going to seal the sector. If we do not leave in 6 hours, we are trapped. The Aurora Howl cannot jump. Her navigation cortex is fried. But Astra says you can bridge the connection. With your implant. Jacob shook his head. No. If I open that connection fully, it might fry my brain. I told you it is damaged. Then we make a trade, Nira said. Her eyes narrowed, shrewd and sharp. You help us hack the station grid. Buy us time. Trick the sensors into thinking we are gone. In exchange, Astra will repair your implant. She can rewrite the code, smooth out the scar tissue. No more headaches. No more static. You can be quiet again. Jacob paused. The offer was tempting. The static in his head had been a constant companion for 6 years, a low-level torture that made sleep impossible. To be free of it, But to hack the station grid, that was treason. If he was caught, it was a life sentence in the helium mines. "And if I say no?" Jacob asked. "Then we let you go," Naira said softly. "We will drop you at the nearest airlock. You can go back to your crawlspace, and we will stay here and wait for the Orion Crown to come and cut us apart." It was manipulation pure and simple, but it was effective. Jacob looked at the girl, the wolf, who had offered him a place in her strange metallic family. He thought about Helena Dre's security forces. He thought about the assets they claimed to own. "I need access to a terminal," Jacob said, standing up. "And if this Rashka burns a hole in my stomach, I am billing you for the medical costs." Nira grinned, her sharp teeth flashing. "Deal, old man." The bridge of the Aurora Howl was a sensory deprivation tank compared to the rest of the ship. The walls were translucent, showing the dark industrial cavern of the shipyard outside. Kalen stood at the helm, his paws moving over a haptic interface that rippled like water. When Jacob entered with Naira, Kalen stiffened. A low rumble started in his chest, a vibration so deep Jacob felt it in his teeth. Jacob froze. "Is he going to bite me?" Naira rolled her eyes. "No. That is a greeting rumble. It means I acknowledge your presence, but I am watching you. If he wanted to bite you, he would be silent." "Good to know," Jacob muttered. He walked up to the tactical console, where Astra's avatar was waiting. "You accepted the contract," Astra said. "Logic dictates you are either brave or desperate. Current probability leans toward desperation." "Let us get this over with," Jacob said. "What is the status of the station grid?" "Heavy encryption," Astra reported. "Orion Crown uses a rolling cipher. I can break it, but it takes time I do not have. I need a back door." "I know a back door," Jacob said. He sat in the interface chair. It molded to his body, warm and firm. "During the war, we installed subroutines in all colonial stations. Emergency overrides for the engineers. They were never purged." He reached for the connector cable. It was a bilink, a wet, organic tendril that pulsed with light. He hesitated. "It will not hurt," Astra said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I will buffer the input." Jacob took a deep breath and pressed the connector to the port behind his ear. The world dissolved. There was no transition. 1 second he was on the bridge. The next, he was floating in a sea of data. It was not the visual interface of a screen. It was direct sensory input. He felt the station's network, like a physical landscape. The firewalls were towering cliffs of black ice. The data streams were rushing rivers of neon light. And he felt her. The Aurora Howl. She was a massive, warm presence at his back, a mountain of consciousness. She was weak, her thoughts fragmented by pain, but she was aware of him. She wrapped her mind around him like a blanket. Safe, protected, engineer, friend. The thoughts were not words, but emotions translated into meaning. "Focus, Jacob," Astra's voice cut through the haze. She was a focused beam of light next to him in this digital space. "The Sector 7 relay is to your left." Jacob navigated the cyberspace with a thought. He found the relay a knot of complex coding. He reached out with his mind, his fingers, made of code, and began to untie it. It was difficult. His implant was old, the signal stuttering. But the ship compensated. Every time his signal faltered, the Aurora Howl poured energy into him, stabilizing the link. They worked in tandem, man, AI, and ship. A triad of consciousness. "Got it," Jacob thought, shouted. "I am in the maintenance subgrid, looping the camera feeds, replacing our thermal signature with a background radiation ghost." "Excellent," Astra said. "Now check the priority traffic. See what Orion Crown is moving." Jacob shifted his focus to the secure channels. He broke the encryption on a high-priority dispatch labeled Project Emberlink, Retrieval. He opened the file. Information flooded his mind. Not just text, but blueprints, audio logs, and financial projections. Subject Emberlink neural node. Status active. Target unidentified veteran. Objective capture and vivisection. Secondary objective seizure of all luminary assets in the sector for fleet integration. Jacob felt a cold spike of horror. They were not just looking for the ship. They were looking for him. Helena Dre had authorized a Level 5 extraction. That meant killing teams. That meant collateral damage was acceptable. And then he saw the historical data attached to the file. Project Origin Starheart Accord. Founder redacted. Note: the Emberlink technology was originally designed as a diplomatic bridge, not a weapon. Jacob, Naira's voice came from the real world, distant and muffled. Your nose is bleeding. Jacob pulled back from the data stream, but something caught his attention. A signature in the file. A digital fingerprint buried deep in the code of the Emberlink project. It was his own code. Not the code of a grunt engineer. The code of a lead architect. Jacob gasped and ripped the connector from his head. He slammed back into reality, gasping for air. The bridge spun around him. He fell out of the chair, hitting the deck hard. Jacob! Nira was at his side instantly, her hands gripping his shoulders. What happened? You seized up. Jacob looked at her, then at Kalen, who had turned from the helm. He wiped the blood from his nose. His hands were shaking violently. They know, Jacob rasped. Orion Crown. They know I am here. And they are not just coming for the ship. They are coming for me. Why? Kalen demanded. Because I am the prototype, Jacob whispered. The memories were still locked away, hidden behind the mental blocks he had paid to have installed, but the file had cracked the door open just a sliver. I did not just use the Emberlink. I helped build it. I am the reason you are being hunted. Kalen roared a sound of pure betrayal. He lunged forward, grabbing Jacob by the collar of his jumpsuit and lifting him off the ground with one hand. You built the chains, Kalen shouted, baring his fangs. You built the collar they want to put on us. Kalen, stop! Naira screamed, grabbing her brother's arm. Her claws dug into his armor. He did not know. Look at him. He is terrified. He is a monster, Kalen spat. I am a target, Jacob yelled back, dangling in the wolf's grip. Just like you. Helena Dre wants to cut my brain out just as much as she wants to dismantle your sister. We are on the same side of the knife, Kalen. Kalen stared at him, his golden eyes burning. Slowly, the rage simmered down to a cold suspicion. He dropped Jacob. Prove it, Kalen said. If you are on our side, then help us fight them. We cannot fight them here, Jacob said, massaging his throat. We need to leave, now. I looped the sensors, but that will only hold for an hour. Once they realize the data is fake, they will flood this sector with drones. We cannot jump, Astra reminded them. The navigation is broken. Jacob looked at the biobed where he had been scanned. He looked at the connector cable dangling from the console. He felt the phantom thrum of the ship in his mind, the way she had supported him, held him up when he was weak. He realized he had a choice. He could run. He could take his 47 credits and disappear into the vents. He could hide until the heat died down. But he looked at Nira. She was looking at him, not with fear, but with a desperate hope. She had called him family. She had trusted him when he was just a grumpy mechanic in a noodle shop. I can navigate, Jacob said quietly. The bridge went silent. You said it would fry your brain, Naira whispered. It might, Jacob admitted. But Astra can buffer it, and the ship she can help carry the load. If we link up fully, a full Emberlink integration, I can process the jump coordinates. I can be the navigation cortex. You would risk your mind for us, Kalen asked, skepticism heavy in his voice. Jacob stood up straighter. He smoothed his jumpsuit. You offered me a job, didn't you, human advisor to the pack? Naira smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it lit up the room. Welcome to the pack, old man. Do not get sentimental, Jacob grumbled, moving back to the chair. And Kaylin, if I turn into a vegetable, make sure someone feeds me the spicy lizard meat. I think I am starting to like it. Kaylin let out a short, sharp huff of air. It was almost a laugh. Agreed. Astra, Jacob said, sitting down and taking the cable in his hand. Prepare for full neural synchronization. Bypass safety protocols. We are going for a ride. Acknowledged, Astra said, her avatar, shimmering with anticipation. Sinking in 3, 2, 1, Jacob jacked in. This time, there was no transition. There was only the roar of 1,000 stars exploding in his mind and the welcoming howl of the aurora waiting to be set free. The neural interface felt like a storm brewing just behind Jacob's eyes. He sat in the pilot's chair, the BioLink cable throbbing with a faint, rhythmic light as it connected his skull to the aurora howl. Station sensors are looped, Jacob said, his voice tight. We have a 3-minute window before the handshake protocol resets. If we are not gone by then, we are just a very expensive target practice. Engaging thrusters, Kaylin growled from the helm. The massive wolf's paws danced over the controls. Astra, keep the signature low. We drift out like space junk. Drifting, Astra confirmed. Her avatar flickered near Jacob's shoulder. Though, for the record, this plan has a success probability of 17%. I advise everyone to clinch. The ship shuddered as the docking clamps released. The aurora howl began to slide silently out of the dark recess of the shipyard, moving into the open void. Jacob held his breath. On the monitors, the massive bulk of the Halcyon ring loomed, a city in space, spinning slowly against the backdrop of the gas giant. They were a silver speck against the darkness. Almost clear, Jacob whispered. Just past the outer buoy, clang. The ship lurched violently, throwing Nira against the bulkhead. The lights on the bridge turned a sickening deep red. We hit something, Kaylin shouted, fighting the controls. No, Astra's voice lost its sarcastic edge. We were caught. The station just deployed a biostasis net. It is a containment field specifically tuned to Lupanari biological frequencies. On the main screen, a web of green energy materialized around them, crackling with static. It tightened like a noose. The aurora howl screamed not a sound, but a psychic shriek that tore through Jacob's mind. Pain. Trapped. Cold. They were waiting for us. Jacob realized, his stomach dropping. The loop, they let us loop the sensors. They wanted us to come out into the open. The main comms channel crackled open. A face appeared on the holographic viewer. It was Helena Dre. She looked perfectly composed, sipping tea in her high-orbit office, while she ordered their execution. Good evening, Helena said, her voice smooth as silk. I must say I am impressed. Most scavengers would not have made it past the inner airlock. Her gaze shifted, locking directly onto Jacob. And hello to you, Sample Emberlink. Or should I say architect? The bridge went silent. Nira looked at Jacob. Kaylin froze. Architect. Kaylin repeated the word, heavy with accusation. The biostasis net holding you, Helena continued, is a marvelous piece of engineering. It isolates the neural pathways of a bioship, paralyzing it without damaging the hull. It was designed 6 years ago by the 7th Orbital Division, specifically by a team lead named Jacob Vance. She smiled. You built the cage, Jacob. It is only fitting you are the one inside it. The transmission cut, leaving only the image of the tightening energy net on the screen. Jacob stared at his hands. They were shaking. The memories he had paid to suppress were leaking through the cracks in his mental walls. He remembered the schematics. He remembered the late nights in the lab, telling himself they were building a containment system for peace, a way to stop the war without bloodshed. He had lied to himself then, and he had lied to them now. Is it true? Kaylin asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Jacob looked up. He could not deny it. The net outside was reacting to the ship's struggles, exactly as he had designed it to. Every time the Aurora Howl tried to surge power, the net tightened, feeding on the energy. "Yes," Jacob whispered. "I designed the core algorithm. It was supposed to be a non-lethal alternative, to stop the fighting." "Non-lethal!" Kalen roared. He spun around, grabbing Jacob by the throat and slamming him against the pilot's chair. "It is torture! Do you feel her? Do you feel my sister screaming in your head? It is freezing her mind. You built a torture device and called it peace." "Kalen," Naira shouted, pulling at her brother's arm. "Let him go. He is the only one who can stop it." "He is the enemy," Kalen snarled, baring his fangs inches from Jacob's face. "Humans, always the same. You create the poison and then sell the antidote." "I did not know they would use it like this," Jacob choked out. "I left the project. I wiped my memory because I could not live with what they turned it into." "That does not help us now," Kalen threw Jacob back into the chair. "Get us out, or I will rip that implant out of your skull myself." Jacob gasped for air, rubbing his bruised neck. He looked at the screen. The net was at 80% integrity. The ship's hull integrity was dropping. "I can disable it," Jacob said, his voice raspy. "But not from here. The command codes are encrypted. I need to override the station's control node directly." "We cannot reach the station," Astra said. "We are paralyzed." "I do not need to reach the station physically," Jacob said. He looked at the BioLink cable. "I need to reach it digitally, through the net." He looked at Kalen, then at Naira. "The net is a two-way street," Jacob explained. "It feeds on the ship's neural energy. If I reverse the polarity, if I push a signal back up the line through the net and into the station's emitter, I can overload their system. I can command the net to target them." "That requires a full neural merge," Astra warned. "Jacob, your implant is damaged. A full merge with a bioship pushing that much data will burn out your synapses. You will be lobotomized. Best case scenario, you end up in a coma. Worst case, your brain melts." "It is my mess," Jacob said, grabbing the cable. "I built the cage. I have to break it." He looked at Kalen. "If I burn out, space me. Do not let them take me alive." Kalen looked at him, the anger still simmering but mixed now with a grudging respect. He nodded once. "If you save her, you earn your death." "Jacob, no." Naira stepped forward. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear. "You do not have to do this alone. You will die." "It is the only way, kid," Jacob said, forcing a smile. "Besides, I am unemployed. What else do I have to do?" He moved to plug the cable in, but Naira's hand stopped him. She placed her palm over the port on his neck, her fingers warm against his skin. "Not alone," she said firmly. "The pack does not let one hunt alone." "Naira, what are you doing?" Kalen asked. "I am the buffer," Naira said. She looked at Jacob. "My mind is younger, more elastic. I can filter the overflow. I can hold the door open while you work." "It will hurt," Jacob warned her. "It will feel like fire." "Then we burn together," Naira said. Her golden eyes locked onto his, fierce and unyielding. Jacob nodded. He plugged the cable in. Contact. The world vanished in a flash of white fire. It was not like the hack earlier. This was a flood, a tidal wave of sensation. Jacob felt the Aurora Howl not as a ship, but as a body. He felt the cold vacuum of space on his skin. He felt the burning constriction of the energy net wrapping around his ribs. And he felt Naira. She was a brilliant, warm light beside him in the storm. Her mind wrapped around his, stabilizing the connection. Through the link, he saw flashes of her life memories that were not his own. He saw a small, cramped cabin on a transport ship. He saw a female luminari with kind eyes, Naira's mother, holding a loaf of bread. She was telling a story to a pup with floppy ears. "The humans are afraid, little one," the mother said. "But not all of them. Remember the engineer. The one with the sad eyes, he stopped the soldiers. He let our pod go. He gave us a chance. Jacob's heart seized. He remembered that moment. It was a skirmish near the Jupiter belt. He had overridden a firing command allowing a refugee pod to escape. He had been reprimanded for it. He never knew who was inside. It was you, Naira's thought echoed in his mind, filled with wonder and a deep, aching gratitude. You saved us. You have always been saving us. The realization hit Jacob like a physical blow. The guilt that had weighed him down for 6 years, the belief that he was just a cog in the war machine cracked. He was not just a builder of cages. He was a breaker of chains. Focus. Jacob commanded himself. He grabbed the mental image of the energy net. It was a complex lattice of code, green and glowing. He found the source, the signal beam coming from the halcyon ring. Astra, give me full power to the main deflector dish, Jacob thought. Routing auxiliary power, Astra replied instantly. Warning, neural temperature rising. Jacob screamed a soundless roar in the digital void. He grabbed the net with his mind and pulled. He did not just break it. He reversed it. He took the containment algorithm, his own creation, and rewrote the target parameters in real time. Target Orion Crown security grid. Authorization architect override Alpha 9. On the bridge, Jacob's body arched, his back lifting off the chair. His eyes glowed with a terrifying, searing blue light. Naira, standing behind him, with her hand on his neck, gasped as her own eyes flared gold. The Aurora Howl shuddered. The silver hull rippled, turning a deep, angry crimson. Outside, the green energy net faltered. Then it snapped. The beams of energy that were holding the ship suddenly whipped backward, tracing the signal back to the source. On the halcyon ring, alarms screamed. The drone ships that had been launching from the docking bays suddenly lost power. Their containment fields activated, locking them in place. The station's own weapon system swiveled, targeting the Orion Crown command tower. "What is happening?" Helena Dre screamed in her office as the lights flickered and died. "Why are my drones targeting us?" "Someone rewrote the IFF protocols," her technician shouted. "The net is attacking the host." On the Aurora Howl, Jacob poured everything he had into the push. He felt his synapses firing to the breaking point. He felt the capillaries in his nose burst. He felt the darkness encroaching on his vision. Jacob Naira's voice was a lifeline. "Stay with me, do not let go, one last push," Jacob thought. "Get us out of here." He slammed the final command into the system. Execute. The net collapsed entirely, releasing the Aurora Howl. At the same moment, the station's pursuit sensors were blinded by a massive feedback surge. "Jump!" Jacob gasped, his voice barely a whisper in the real world. Now, Astra did not hesitate. Initiating short-range displacement. Brace. The ship did not accelerate. It simply ceased to exist in that coordinate. Space folded around them. The stars streaked into lines of light, then vanished into the swirling gray chaos of slipspace. The connection severed. Jacob slumped forward, the cable popping out of his neck. He hit the floor unconscious before he landed. Jacob, Naira, fell to her knees beside him. She was shaking, blood trickling from her own ears, but she ignored it. She turned him over. His face was pale, his breathing shallow and ragged. The port behind his ear was smoking. "Get him to the medbay," Kalen barked, lifting Jacob effortlessly in his arms. The giant wolf looked at the human with a new expression. There was no hatred left, only the solemn respect reserved for a pack member who had thrown himself onto the spear to save the rest. "Did we make it?" Naira asked, her voice trembling, as she followed, holding Jacob's limp hand. "We are in the Nebula Veil," Astra reported. Her avatar was flickering, damaged by the surge. "We are blind. We are burning. But we are free." The medical bay was quiet, save for the rhythmic hum of the biobed. Jacob floated in the gel, his body wrapped in regenerative filaments. Naira sat on the floor beside the tank, her head resting against the glass. She had refused to leave. Her tail was wrapped around her legs, motionless. "He is stable," Astra said softly, appearing next to her. His neural pathways are scarred but intact. The buffer you provided saved his higher functions. He will wake up, eventually. I saw inside him, Astra, Nira whispered. I saw the war. I saw the people he could not save. He carries so many heavy things, dark things. Humans are efficient at storing trauma, Astra noted. It is a design flaw. Nira looked at Jacob's sleeping face. He thinks he is broken. He thinks he is just the weapon maker. She pressed her hand against the glass. But he is not. He is the one who opened the cage. Kalen walked in. He had cleaned the blood from his armor, but he still looked weary. He stood beside his sister, looking down at the man in the tank. Orion Crown has declared us terrorists, Kalen said. They say we attacked the station. They have put a bounty on the ship, and a double bounty on the human. Let them come, Nira said. A low growl vibrated in her throat, not of fear, but of defiance. He is back now, and the pack protects its own. Kalen looked at her, surprised by the steel in her voice. He smiled, a rare toothy expression. He rested a heavy hand on her shoulder. Yes, Kalen agreed. We do. Inside the tank, Jacob's fingers twitched. In the darkness of his coma, the nightmares were still there, the fire, the screams, the war. But this time, there was something else. A golden light, a warm hand holding him, a voice whispering in the dark. Welcome home, Jacob. The aurora howl drifted into the dense, colorful clouds of the nebula veil, hidden from the sensors of the world that wanted to destroy them. They were battered. They were hunted. But for the first time in a long time, they were not alone. The nebula veil was not a place where ships went to live. It was a place where they went to disappear. It was a chaotic soup of ionized gas, drifting asteroids, and electromagnetic storms that rendered standard sensors useless. To the naked eye, it was a breathtaking bruise on the face of the galaxy, swirls of violent violet, deep indigo, and burning orange. To the navigation computer of the Aurora Howl, it was a nightmare. For 3 days, the pack ship had drifted in the lee of a massive, iron-heavy asteroid, using the rock as a shield against the radiation winds. The ship was alive, but she was hurting. The crimson flush of her hull had faded to a dull matte gray as she conserved energy to knit her wounds together. Jacob stood in the engineering bay, which looked less like a machine shop and more like the inside of a giant heart. The walls pulsed slowly. He was knee-deep in a crawlspace, his hands covered in a bioluminescent slime that acted as the ship's hydraulic fluid. Pass me the spanner, Jacob said. The organic one, not the metal one. A tentacle of hard light materialized next to him, holding a tool that looked like a curved bone. You are enjoying this too much, Astra said. Her avatar was flickering slightly, a side effect of the interference outside. You have been in this crawlspace for 6 hours. You are avoiding the crew. I am working, Jacob grunted, taking the tool. He jammed it into a ruptured conduit. The ship shuddered and a warm sensation of gratitude washed over his mind. It was faint like a distant echo, but it was there. And I am not avoiding anyone. I am just processing. Processing the fact that you and Nira shared a neural workspace, Astra asked. Or processing the fact that you now have memories of chasing a rabbit through a synthetic forest on a moon you have never visited. Jacob froze. He squeezed his eyes shut. It happened without warning. The flashback. The smell of pine needles, sharp and cold. The sensation of 4 legs driving into soft earth. The thrill of the hunt. The taste of copper in his mouth. A voice calling him Little Claw. Jacob shook his head violently, forcing the alien memory back into the box. It was the side effect of the Emberlink, the bleed. When he had merged with the ship and Nira to break the containment net, their minds had not just touched. They had poured into one another. It is getting better, Jacob lied. He wiped the slime onto his jumpsuit. The hallucinations are fading. My sensors indicate your heart rate spikes every time Naira enters the room, Astra noted dryly. That is not a hallucination, Jacob. That is awkward. Just fix the shield modulation, Astra, Jacob muttered, climbing out of the crawl space. He walked into the main corridor. The ship was quiet. Most of the crew were in hibernation cycles to conserve oxygen and food, while the recyclers were repaired. He made his way to the mess hall, hoping to grab a protein pack and retreat back to his bunk. He stopped in the doorway. Naira was there. She was sitting at one of the low tables, staring into a cup of steaming liquid. She looked tired. Her ears were drooping, and her tail was wrapped tight around her waist like a belt. She looked up as he entered. For a second, Jacob saw a flash of his own memory reflected in her eyes, a cold trench on Mars, the sound of artillery, the crushing weight of a rifle in frozen hands. Naira flinched, blinking the image away. "Sorry," she whispered. "That one was loud." Jacob walked over and sat opposite her. He placed his hands on the table. They were scarred, stained with blue fluid. "Mars," he said softly. "The siege of Valles Marineris. It was 20 years ago. It was a bad winter." "You were cold," Naira said, her voice distant. "You were so cold you could not feel your feet. And you were afraid. Not dying. You were afraid you would never see the sun again." Jacob nodded. It was unnerving to hear his own deepest fears, spoken by a girl who hadn't even been born when that battle was fought. "And you were 5. You fell out of a ventilation shaft on the cargo deck. You broke your wrist. You did not cry because you did not want Kalen to worry." Naira managed a weak smile. "He was worried anyway. He always worries." "How is the head?" Jacob asked, tapping his own temple. "Crowded," Naira admitted. She took a sip of her drink. "It is strange, Jacob. I have always been part of the pack. We share feelings, empathy. But this seeing specific pictures, hearing your thoughts in my voice, it is intimate. Too intimate." "It will pass," Jacob said, though he was not sure if that was true. The connection was forced. It left a bruise on the brain. Bruises heal. "Did you mean it?" Naira asked suddenly. Jacob looked at her. "Mean what?" "In the link," Naira said, looking down at her cup. "Just before we jumped. You thought you felt like you finally found something worth breaking for. You felt like you were home." Jacob felt the heat rise in his neck. He had hoped that part had been lost in the static. "I was delirious. High on neural feedback." Naira looked up, her golden eyes piercing. She did not say anything. She just let the silence stretch heavy and knowing. "Okay," Jacob sighed, leaning back. "Maybe I did. You people, this ship is the first time in 6 years I have not felt like a spare part." "Is that what you want to hear?" Naira's tail gave a single, soft thump against the floor. Yes, life in the Nebula Veil settled into a routine of survival and repair. The external environment was hostile, constantly bombarding the Aurora Howl with radiation spikes and magnetic anomalies. But inside the hull, a strange domesticity began to form. Jacob was no longer the outsider. The pack had seen what he did. They knew he had nearly burned his brain out to break the net. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a curiosity that was sometimes overwhelming. "No, you do not eat the rind," Jacob explained patiently for the 3rd time. They were in the mess hall again. This time, it was crowded. Several Lupanari crew members were gathered around, watching Jacob eat a synthetic orange he had found in the ship's emergency stores. "But it smells the strongest," a young wolf named Rix muttered, sniffing the peel Jacob had discarded. "It tastes like bitterness and regret," Jacob said. "Trust me." "Like the rashka you tried to eat," Naira teased from the other side of the table. The crew laughed. It was a barking, yipping sound that filled the room. Jacob rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. "That was sabotage," Jacob pointed out. You did not tell me the sauce was made from capsicum concentrate. I told you it was spicy, Naira countered, grinning. I cannot help it if humans have weak tongues. We have excellent tongues, Jacob grumbled. We just prefer not to burn our taste buds off for recreation. Kalen walked in then. The laughter died down, instantly replaced by respectful silence. The captain looked at the scene, the human sitting amidst his crew, peeling fruit, trading insults with his sister. His expression was unreadable. Jacob, Kalen said. Bridge. Astra found something. Jacob stood up, wiping his hands. Trouble, maybe, Kalen said. Or maybe an answer. On the bridge, the holographic display was a mess of static and scrolling code. The nebula's interference made long-range scanning impossible, but Astra had been scrubbing the data Jacob had pulled from the Halcyon Ring station during the hack. I have been decrypting the Project Emberlink files, Astra said, as Jacob and Nira joined Kalen at the console. Most of it is technical data we already know. Blueprints for the control nodes, schematics for the neural interface. But buried in the subdirectory, hidden under 3 layers of quantum encryption, I found a document. A document, Jacob asked. A treaty, Astra corrected. The hologram shifted. It displayed an old digital parchment. The header read, The Starheart Accord. I know this, Jacob whispered. The phantom headache behind his ear throbbed. I have heard that name. Read the preamble, Astra instructed. Jacob stepped closer. This agreement serves as a binding covenant between the Free Systems Alliance and the Lupanari High Council. It recognizes the sentient status of all bioships designated as pack ships. It prohibits the use of neural enslavement technology. It guarantees the right of safe passage. This is impossible, Kalen said, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. This treaty says we are free. It says the war ended with our rights guaranteed. But the Orion Crown, they told us, we were surrendered property. They told us we had no rights. They lied, Naira said, her eyes wide. They buried this. They hid the truth so they could keep hunting us. So they could turn us into assets. Who signed it? Jacob asked. For a treaty to be valid, it needs a signatory from the High Command. That is the interesting part, Astra said. The Lupanari signatory is High Chieftain Vorn, your father Kalen. He disappeared at the end of the war. Kalen gripped the console, his claws digging into the metal. He did not disappear. They told us he died in a reactor breach. And the human signatory, Jacob asked. Who represented the Alliance? The name is redacted, Astra said. Scrubbed from the file. But the digital signature, the biometric key used to lock the document, is intact. She spun the hologram. A complex waveform appeared. It was a neural pattern, a brainwave map. Jacob stared at it. He felt the blood drain from his face. He knew that pattern. He saw it every time Astra ran a diagnostic on his implant. It is me, Jacob whispered. The bridge fell into a stunned silence. The only sound was the low hum of the ship's reactor. That is my neural signature, Jacob said, his voice trembling. But that is impossible. I was a combat engineer. I was a grunt. I did not sign treaties. I fixed drones. Did you? Astra asked gently. Your memory was wiped, Jacob. You paid to have 6 years of your life erased. You thought you were removing trauma. What if you were removing the truth? Jacob grabbed his head. Fragments of memory assaulted him, not from Naira this time, but from himself. A room with a glass table. A Lupanari with gray fur and wise eyes, Kalen's father. A handshake. A promise. We will build a bridge, not a weapon. I was the architect, Jacob realized. The words tasted like ash. Helena called me that. I did not just build the Emberlink. I built peace. And then someone made me forget. They used my own technology to wipe me so they could bury the Accord. Orion Crown, Kalen growled. They stole our freedom and they stole your mind. Jacob looked at Kalen. We have to release this. If we get this document to the Concord Tribunal, it proves everything. It proves Helena Dre is a war criminal. It proves the Aurora Howl is a citizen, not property. We are stuck in a nebula, Naira pointed out. We cannot transmit. And the nearest tribunal station is 3 sectors away. We will never make it past the blockade. We have to try, Jacob said. He looked at the star map. We fixed the drive. We made one long jump. We crash land on the tribunal's doorstep if we have to. Beep, beep, beep. A sharp alarm cut through the air. Proximity alert, Astra shouted. Signature detected. 7 kilometers off the port bow. Moving fast. Is it a ship? Kalen barked. Too small, Astra reported. It is a drone. An Orion Crown hunter-killer class. It must have tracked our ion trail before we entered the cloud. If it sees us, it will tag us, Jacob said. It will broadcast our coordinates to the fleet. We will be swarmed in 10 minutes. We cannot shoot it, Kalen said. The energy discharge will light us up like a flare. We have to blind it, Jacob said. He looked at Naira. We have to hack it. With the ship's systems down, Naira asked. How, not the ship, Jacob said. He tapped his temple. Us. We do the link again. A light version. Just enough to project a signal. We trick the drone's sensors into thinking we are an asteroid. Jacob, Naira warned. Your brain is still healing. Another link could cause a seizure. It is just a drone, Jacob said, moving to the pilot's chair. It is not a station. It is a whisper, not a scream. I can handle it. If you help me. Naira did not hesitate. She stepped up behind the chair. She placed her hands on his shoulders. I am with you. Astra, give me a direct line to the external comms array, Jacob ordered. He plugged the cable into his neck. The world shifted. It was softer this time. The connection was not a tidal wave. It was a warm stream. He felt Naira's presence immediately, a steady, comforting hum in the back of his mind. She was the anchor. Ready, her thought brushed against his. Ready, Jacob thought back. They reached out into the void. The nebula was a storm of static, but through the chaos they felt the drone. It was a cold, metallic shark hunting in the dark. Its sensors were sweeping the area, looking for the thermal signature of the Aurora Howl. I see it, Naira thought. It is locked on. Not yet, Jacob replied. We are going to rewrite its reality. He pushed a packet of data toward the drone. It was a ghost signal. He painted a picture in the drone's electronic mind, a picture of empty space, of cold rock, of nothingness. He felt the drone resist. It was military hardware. Its firewalls were thick. It is fighting, Jacob gritted his teeth. It knows we are here. Push harder, Naira urged. Together, like the wind. She poured her strength into him. It was not just mental energy. It was emotion. It was her fierce desire to protect the pack, her anger at the hunters, her trust in him. Jacob channeled that energy. He wove it into the code. He did not just hack the drone. He overwhelmed it with the concept of absence. The drone hesitated. Its thrusters fired, pausing its approach. Its sensors swept over the Aurora Howl, but the data Jacob was feeding it said there was nothing there but gas and dust. Turn away, Jacob commanded. There is nothing here. Slowly, agonizingly, the drone turned. It accelerated away, disappearing into the violet fog, continuing its hunt elsewhere. Jacob slumped back in the chair, the cable slipping from his neck. He did not pass out this time. He just felt drained, like he had run a marathon. It is gone, Kalen confirmed, watching the scope. He looked at Jacob and Naira. That was impressive. Naira squeezed Jacob's shoulders. You did it. We did it, Jacob corrected. He reached up and covered her hand with his. Her fingers were warm. He did not let go. An hour later, Jacob was in the medical bay again, but this time just for a checkup. Astra insisted on monitoring his neural activity after the link. Naira was sitting on the edge of the biobed, while Jacob adjusted the settings on his scanner. "You are shaking," Naira said softly. Jacob looked at his hands. A fine tremor was running through his fingers. "Adrenaline dump. It happens." "It is not adrenaline," Naira said. She hopped off the bed and stood in front of him. "It is fear," Jacob sighed. He let his hands drop. "I am terrified, Naira. We found the Accord. We tricked the drone. But now comes the hard part. We have to leave the nebula. We have to jump into open space. And if I mess up the navigation, if my brain misfires, I could jump us right into a star. Or into Helena's lap." "You will not," Naira said with absolute conviction. "How do you know?" Jacob asked. "I am a broken mechanic with a 6-year-old hole in his memory." "Because you are the architect," Naira said. She took a step closer. "You built the piece once. You can do it again." She reached out and touched his face. Her claws were retracted, her pads soft against his rough skin. "And," she added, her voice dropping to a whisper, "because I will be right there with you. I am not letting you go into the dark alone again." Jacob looked at her. In the soft light of the medical bay, with the violet storm raging outside the viewport, she looked less like an alien and more like the only thing that made sense in the universe. The connection between them, the Ember Link, was dormant, but the pull was still there. It was magnetic. He leaned in. He could smell the rain scent of her fur, feel the warmth radiating from her. Naira tilted her head up. Her eyes fluttered closed. Jacob's heart hammered against his ribs. He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Whoosh! The door to the medical bay hissed open. "Engine diagnostics are complete," Kalen announced loudly, marching into the room with a datapad in hand. Jacob and Naira jumped apart, as if they had been electrocuted. Jacob spun around, pretending to check a monitor that was turned off. Naira suddenly found the ceiling tiles incredibly interesting. Kalen stopped. He looked at Jacob, who was flushing a deep red. He looked at his sister, who was refusing to make eye contact. He sniffed the air. "Am I interrupting something?" Kalen asked, his voice deadpan. "No," Jacob and Naira said in unison. "Good," Kalen said, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Because we are ready. Astra has routed the power from life support to the drive. We have enough energy for one jump, a long one, to the conquered tribunal sector." Jacob cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Right. The jump. I should go to the bridge." "You should," Kalen agreed. He stepped aside to let Jacob pass. As Jacob squeezed past the massive wolf, Kalen murmured low enough that only Jacob could hear. "If you hurt her, I eat you. If you make her happy, try not to be too incompetent." Jacob stopped. He looked up at the captain. "I will do my best." The bridge was a hive of activity. Every member of the pack was at their station. The atmosphere was taut, vibrating with the tension of a coiled spring. The Aurora Howl was poised at the edge of the nebula veil. Beyond the swirling clouds lay the black void of open space and the hunting grounds of the Orion Crown. Jacob sat in the pilot's chair. He had the connector cable in his hand. "Destination coordinates locked," Astra reported. "Concord Tribunal Station Prime. Distance 400 light-years. This will be the longest jump a pack ship has ever attempted with a human navigator." "No pressure," Jacob muttered. He looked around the bridge. He saw the crew Lupanari of all ages, looking at him with trust. He saw Kalen at the helm, standing tall and proud. He saw Naira standing beside him, her hand resting on the back of his chair, her presence a silent promise. "Everyone ready?" Jacob asked. "The pack is ready," Kalen said. "Take us out, architect." Jacob took a deep breath. He thought about the 47 credits in his pocket back on the station. He thought about the cold maintenance crawl space. He thought about the man he used to be, the ghost haunting his own life. He gripped the cable. "Let us go make some noise," Jacob said. He plugged in. The Aurora Howl roared a sound that was felt in the bone, rather than heard with the ear. The engines flared, turning the nebula's gas into a streak of brilliant white fire. The ship surged forward, punching a hole through the veil. One moment, they were surrounded by violet clouds. Next, they were gone. The Concord Tribunal Station Prime was a monolith of white marble and transparent aluminum, a stark contrast to the gritty industrialism of Halcyon Ring or the violet chaos of the Nebula Veil. It floated in the void like a judgment passed by the gods, perfectly symmetrical, coldly beautiful, and utterly intimidating. It was the seat of intergalactic law, a place where the pen was supposedly mightier than the plasma cannon. The Aurora Howl limped into the designated docking bay. Her hull was scorched black from the jump, her silver skin dull and non-reflective. She looked like a brawler walking into a ballroom. Jacob stood at the airlock, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his mechanic's jumpsuit. He had refused the offer of a formal tunic from the ship's fabricator. "You look like you are going to fix the judge's sink," Astra commented. Her avatar was projected from a wall panel looking crisp and fully repaired now that they were connected to the station's high-bandwidth grid. "I am a mechanic," Jacob said, adjusting his collar. "I am not going to pretend to be a diplomat. If they want the truth, they get the grease stains too." Nira stepped up beside him. She was wearing a ceremonial sash over her tunics, woven with the patterns of her lost homeworld. Her ears were pressed flat against her head, a sign of extreme anxiety. "There are so many of them," she whispered, looking at the security feed. The docking bay was lined with tribunal guards in pristine white armor. "They have suppression staves." "They are just for show," Jacob said, though he checked the location of his own hidden knife instinctively. "This is neutral ground. If they fire a shot here, they declare war on the entire tribunal. Even Orion Crown is not that stupid." Kalen loomed behind them. The captain had polished his kinetic armor until it gleamed. He looked less like a refugee and more like a king returning from exile. "Head up, sister," Kalen rumbled. "We do not walk in like prisoners. We walk in like guests who own the place." The airlock cycled open with a pneumatic hiss. The smell of the station hit them, sterile air, filtered to the point of being tasteless. They stepped out. A hush fell over the docking bay. The tribunal guards tightened their grips on their weapons, their eyes widening as they saw the massive Lupanari captain and the human walking beside him. Waiting for them at the end of the gangplank was a Concord official, a small bird-like alien with fluttering feathers and a data pad. "Captain Kalen of the vessel Aurora Howl," the official chirped. "And the human associate, Jacob Vance," Jacob said. "I am not an associate. I am the chief engineer." "Right," the official said, tapping the screen nervously. "The Grand Chamber is assembled. Director Helena Dre has already arrived. She has filed a motion for immediate asset seizure. The hearing begins in 30 minutes. Jacob exchanged a look with Nira. 30 minutes to change the fate of a species. "Lead the way," Jacob said. The Grand Chamber was a cavernous amphitheater designed to make everyone inside feel small. The walls were lined with thousands of pods for observers, and in the center, suspended on anti-gravity platforms, sat the 5 high justiciars of the Concord. Jacob, Nira, and Kalen stood on a floating disc in the center of the room. Opposite them, on a platform that looked more like a throne, sat Helena Dre. She looked immaculate. She wore a suit of midnight blue silk, her hair sculpted into a razor-sharp bob. She was flanked by a team of lawyers and corporate aides. She did not look at the Lupanari. She looked only at the justiciars. "This case is simple, Your Honors," Helena began. Her voice was amplified, filling the massive space with smooth, practiced confidence. "The Orion Crown conglomerate holds legal title to all salvage recovered from the Sector 7 conflict zone. The vessel known as Aurora Howl is a biological asset designated Alpha 49. It malfunctioned, killed its handlers, and fled." She gestured to the air, and a massive holographic screen appeared. It showed grainy footage of the Aurora Howl, breaking out of the Halcyon Ring containment net. The footage had been edited. It showed the ship lashing out the red energy of the override, looking aggressive and violent. It showed Jacob's face, twisted in concentration, looking like a madman. Furthermore, Helena continued pointing a manicured finger at Jacob. This asset has been hijacked by a rogue human terrorist, a former combat engineer named Jacob Vance, who utilized illegal banned military technology to override the asset's safety protocols. He has endangered a civilian station, destroyed corporate property, and stolen a multi-billion credit prototype. The murmurs from the observer pods were loud. Jacob could feel the weight of their judgment. To them, he was just a thief, and the wolf girl beside him was just a dangerous animal. "We demand the immediate return of the asset for decommissioning," Helena concluded, "and the remand of Jacob Vance to Orion Crown custody for interrogation regarding his illegal modifications." The High Justiciar, a being of pure energy, contained within a glass suit, turned its glowing head toward Jacob's platform. "How does the defense plead?" the Justiciar asked. The voice resonated in Jacob's bones. Jacob stepped forward. He hated public speaking. He hated the way the lights glared in his eyes. But he felt Naira's hand brush against his own, a fleeting touch of support. "We plead that she is lying," Jacob said. His voice was rough, unpolished. "The ship is not an asset. Her name is Aurora Howell. She is alive, and she is not property." "Sentimentalism is not a legal defense, Mr. Vance," Helena interjected smoothly. "Biology does not equal citizenship. A lab rat is alive. That does not mean it can vote." "She thinks," Naira cried out, stepping up beside Jacob. "She feels pain. She dreams. You want to cut her apart to see how she works. You killed my parents for the same reason." "Order," the Justiciar boomed. "The witness will restrain herself." "Restrain myself," Naira's voice cracked. "I was hunted through the Nebula Veil. My brother was shot. Jacob nearly burned his brain out to save us. We are not things. You are a malfunction," Helena said coldly, looking at Naira for the first time. "A glitch in the genetic code. Just like the ship." Jacob felt a hot spike of rage. He wanted to cross the gap and wipe that smug look off Helena's face. But violence would only prove her point. "We have evidence," Jacob said. "Evidence that Orion Crown instigated the attack. Evidence that they set the trap at Halcyon Ring." "Fabricated," Helena dismissed. "The ravings of a damaged neural interface." "Let us see the evidence," the Justiciar ruled. Jacob nodded to Kalen. The captain tapped his wristcom. "Astra, upload the Starheart Accord." The central holographic display flickered. The doctored footage of the attack vanished, replaced by the digital parchment of the treaty they had found in the Emberlink files. The Starheart Accord. The words hung in the air 10 meters tall. A hush fell over the room. Even the lawyers on Helena's platform stopped typing. "What is this?" Helena asked, her composure slipping for a fraction of a second. "This is a forgery. There is no such treaty." "It was signed 6 years ago," Jacob said, his voice gaining strength. "At the end of the war. A secret meeting between the Free Systems Alliance and the Lupanari High Council. It ended the hostilities. It recognized the pack ships as sovereign entities." "Impossible," Helena scoffed. "If such a treaty existed, it would be in the public record." "It was buried," Jacob said, "by people like you. People who wanted to keep the war going for profit. People who wanted to enslave a new species instead of making peace with them." "This is absurd," Helena laughed, though the sound was brittle. "A document with no provenance. Who signed it? The file is redacted." "The signature is biometric," Jacob said. "It is locked with a neural key, a brainwave pattern." He looked at the Justiciar. "I request permission to interface with the tribunal's verification system." The Justiciar paused. The energy being seemed to confer with the other judges. "Permission granted. Proceed." An interface pedestal rose from the floor of their platform. Jacob stepped up to it. He could feel the eyes of the entire galaxy on him. He could feel the old port behind his ear itching. He placed his hand on the panel and leaned in, letting the scanner read his retinal and neural patterns. The system hummed. A beam of blue light scanned him. Identity verified, the computer announced. The voice was mechanical and absolute. Subject, Jacob Vance. Rank Chief Architect, Project Emberlink. Status Signatory Authority. On the main screen, the redaction bars on the treaty dissolved. The name at the bottom of the document appeared in clear, bold text. Signed, Jacob Vance for the Human Alliance. The room erupted. Helena Dre stood up, knocking her chair over. That is a lie. He is a mechanic, a squatter. I was the architect, Jacob said, looking directly at her. I designed the Emberlink to be a bridge. I designed it to let us talk to them. And when I realized the military was going to use it to enslave them, I brokered this peace. I signed it. He touched his temple. And then I had my memory wiped. Because I knew if I remembered you would kill me. I hid the key inside the lock. This changes the jurisdiction, the Justiciar said. The glowing figure leaned forward. If this treaty is valid, then the Orion Crown has been operating in violation of intergalactic law for 6 years. You have been hunting sovereign citizens. It is a forgery, Helena screamed, losing her cool entirely. He is a terrorist. He manipulated the system. There is more, Jacob said. There is a video log attached to the signature, a personal record of the day the treaty was signed. He commanded the system to play it. The screen shifted again. It showed a younger Jacob. He was cleaner shaven, wearing a dress uniform. He looked tired, but hopeful. He was standing in the cargo hold of a transport ship. Behind him, a group of Lupanari refugees were huddled. Log date, 47.9, the younger, Jacob said on the screen. We managed to get the transport out of the fire zone. The treaty is signed. But the general is not happy. I have to disappear. But first I have to make sure they are safe. The camera panned. It focused on a female Lupanari sitting on a crate. She had fur the color of storm clouds. In her arms, she held a small pup with oversized ears and a bandage on its tail. The female looked at the camera and bowed her head. Thank you, human, she said. Her voice was melodic. You have given us tomorrow. On the platform, Naira gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled up in her golden eyes. Mother, she whispered. She looked at the screen, then at Jacob. That is me, she said, pointing to the pup in the video. That is the bandage I fell. I fell on the cargo deck. Jacob stared at the screen. The memory hit him like a freight train, not a flashback of war, but a flashback of peace. He remembered the smell of the cargo hold. He remembered the weight of the datapad in his hand. He remembered the mother's eyes. He turned to Naira. I saved you, he whispered. I did not know. All this time I thought I was just some random soldier who got lucky. But I saved you. The fairy tale, Naira sobbed, laughing through her tears. My mother told me a human saved us. She said he had sad eyes and hands that could fix anything. It was you. It was always you. The connection between them, the lingering thread of the Emberlink, resonated. It sang, with a sense of completion. It was not a chance. It was a circle closing. The silence in the grand chamber was profound. The truth was undeniable. It was written in the code, and it was written in the faces of the two people standing on the platform. The High Justiciar raised a hand. The tribunal recognizes the validity of the Starheart Accord, the Justiciar declared. The voice was final. The vessel Aurora Howell is hereby recognized as a free and sentient being. The Orion Crown conglomerate is ordered to cease all operations against Lupanari vessels immediately. Helena Dre looked around wildly. Her aides were stepping away from her, distancing themselves from the blast radius. You cannot do this, Helena shrieked. I represent the board. We own this sector. Director Dre, The justiciar continued. You are hereby detained pending an investigation into war crimes, violation of the armistice, and the illegal trafficking of sentient species. Guards. The tribunal guards in white armor moved. They did not move toward Jacob. They moved toward the corporate platform. Helena tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Two guards grabbed her arms. As they dragged her away, kicking and screaming threats about lawyers and profits, she locked eyes with Jacob one last time. Jacob did not look triumphant. He just looked tired. He looked at her with profound pity. It is over, Helena, Jacob said softly. The leash is cut. The aftermath was a blur of legal proceedings, interviews, and medical scans. But finally, 3 days later, the dust settled. Jacob stood on the observation deck of the Aurora Howell. The ship was docked at a repair gantry, getting the first real overhaul she had seen in years. The Concord had offered to pay for everything reparations for 6 years of negligence. You look decent, a voice said. Jacob turned. Kaylin was standing there. The captain was holding 2 glasses of amber liquid. I feel strange, Jacob admitted, pulling at the collar of his new tunic. It was simple gray but clean. I am used to grease stains. You will get them back soon enough, Kaylin said, handing him a glass. Unless you take the job. The Concord had offered Jacob a position. Ambassador to the Lupinari High Council. A plush office, a massive salary, and a life of safety. I turned it down, Jacob said, taking a sip. The drink burned pleasantly. I am not a politician, Kaylin. I am an engineer. And besides, I have a job. Unless you are firing me, Kaylin smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, warm and open. We do not fire the family, Jacob. But are you sure you could be rich? You could be safe. I have been safe, Jacob said, looking out at the stars. Safe is boring. And I have 47 credits in my pocket. That is enough for me. Kaylin laughed a deep rumble. Then get back to work. The hyperdrive is still misaligned by 0.03%. Astra is complaining. Kaylin clapped Jacob on the shoulder, a blow that would have knocked a lesser man down, and walked away. Jacob turned back to the window. He heard soft footsteps approaching. He did not need to turn around to know who it was. The air shifted, becoming warmer. So, Naira said, leaning against the railing beside him. The architect. That is a big title for a man who eats noodles with a spoon. I prefer Jacob, he said. Naira looked at him. Her fur was groomed shiny and silver in the starlight. She looked regal. She looked free. My mother always said I would meet him again, Naira said quietly. The human from the story. I used to dream about it. I thought he would be a knight in shining armor. Or a giant. Disappointed, Jacob asked, gesturing to his scarred face and graying hair. Naira moved closer. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers interlaced with his human skin against Lupinari fur. It felt right. It felt inevitable. No, she said. The night was just a story. You are real. You are grumpy and you smell like old oil and you buy bad investments. Hey, Jacob protested weakly. That meal was a strategic diplomatic maneuver. It was the best meal of my life, Naira whispered. She turned to face him fully. The humor faded from her eyes, replaced by something deeper, the raw, honest connection they had shared in the Emberlink. You gave us a future, Jacob, she said. Twice. Once when you signed that paper, and once when you walked into that noodle shop. I just did what had to be done, Jacob said. He felt his heart beating fast. You saw us, Naira said. When everyone else saw monsters or assets, you saw us. That is your superpower, old man. You see the invisible. Naira, Jacob started, but the words caught in his throat. She did not wait. She leaned in, standing on her toes. You know, she murmured, her face inches from his. In the fairy tale, the princess usually kisses the hero at the end. I am not a hero, Jacob said. And you are not a princess. You are a pain in the neck who eats my rations. Shut up, Jacob, she smiled. She closed the gap. It was not a human kiss, and it was not a wolf greeting. It was something in between, gentle, tentative, but filled with the weight of everything they had survived. It tasted of the spicy rashka she had learned to make properly, and of the stardust of the nebula veil. Jacob hesitated for a heartbeat, and then he melted. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. The static in his head, the constant low-level buzz of the implant, finally went silent. For the first time in his life, there was only peace. When they broke apart, breathless, Nera rested her forehead against his chest. "Are you staying?" she asked, her voice muffled against his tunic. "I am staying," Jacob promised. "Someone has to keep Astra from reprogramming the toaster to sing opera." Nera laughed, the sound vibrating through his ribs. The Aurora Howl departed Concord Station 3 days later. She did not leave as a fugitive. She left with a full escort of Concord vessels, dipping their wings in salute. Jacob sat in the co-pilot's chair. The neural interface cable was coiled on the console unused. He did not need it to talk to the ship anymore. He and Astra had worked out a voice command system that was 90% efficient and 10% sarcasm. "Course set," Kalen announced. "Sector 9. There are reports of a mining colony holding unregistered bioships." "We are going to get them," Nera said from the comm station. She looked fierce, ready for the next fight. "Engaging drive," Jacob said. He watched the stars stretch into lines of light on the viewport. He thought about the long road behind him. He thought about the war, the guilt, the years of sleeping in a maintenance crawl space. He thought about the moment he decided to spend his last credits on a stranger. Helena Dre had believed that power came from control, from owning things, from turning life into numbers. She was rotting in a cell now with all her billions. Jacob looked at his family. He looked at the wolf girl who had stolen his heart, the warrior who watched his back, and the living ship that held them all. He realized that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't a Death Star or a neural weapon. It was the simple, stubborn refusal to let someone be invisible. It was the choice to extend a hand when you had nothing left to give. One meal, one act of kindness. It had rippled out and changed the shape of the galaxy. "Ready, Jacob," Nera called out, her eyes shining. Jacob smiled. He checked his pocket. 47 credits. He was a rich man. "Punch it," Jacob said. The Aurora Howl roared a song of freedom that echoed across the stars and vanished into the light, heading toward the next soul that needed saving.